Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at medcommsnetworking.com and the associated websites. So information, services, resources, activities for people who work in and around the global medcoms community, by which I'm talking people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and assorted types of businesses. Okay, and we run these webinars frequently now, and they're great because we can involve lots of people from all over the world. We've got a very good international audience again today. Thank you very much for joining us, and we can talk about all sorts of topics that are relevant to medcoms. So today we're going to talk about attracting diverse talent into medcoms, which is a topic which I think is very live at the moment, has been talked about a lot over the last couple of years. Let's be blunt, medcoms is not the most diverse group of people, and we all know that. I'm going to quote a figure which we generated last year. I was supporting 4 years worth of surveys run by Paramount Recruitment, looking at healthcare communications and salaries and so on. Last year, we added in a little question asking about ethnicity, and 9 out of 10 people who filled in the survey, and there were 750 of them, I think, said they were white Caucasian. Now that figure has to be handled with a bit of care. It's an online survey, but we all know that we're not the most diverse of communities. From that point of view, but also generally, I think diversity is important to think about. The fact diversity covers all sorts of different sort of aspects of work. But with working practices changing over the last couple of years in particular, we should be opening up to a much more diverse and inclusive workforce. So I'm absolutely delighted today to have Tobi with us. Tobi runs Diverse. I'll hand over to him in a moment. But basically, he's working with a community of Black and ethnic, minority, disadvantaged communities, graduates and students. And so, you know, to state the obvious, you know, how do we as a community, how do we as a business community reach out to those sorts of people and talk about what we're doing and attract them into our business if we need to? And I think we do all agree we need to. I've got 4 excellent people on the panel with me. Again, we'll introduce them in a moment from 4 different sorts of organizations, and they'll introduce themselves in a minute. And we're going to have just this panel discussion to talk about the issues around this topic. We'd like to get the audience participating as much as possible. So please use the chat box or the Q&A box to contribute questions, observations, and so on. We're going to record a conversation for about 45 minutes and then wrap that up. So without further ado, Tobi, I'm going to hand over to you and ask you to introduce yourself a little bit. You're not a specialist in medcoms in any way. In fact, you probably didn't know about medcoms until a couple of weeks ago, but it's very interesting what you're doing. And firstly, can we just hear a little bit about what that is and your position? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Peter. I really appreciate the intro, and thanks everyone for joining as well. Yeah, definitely not an expert on medcoms, but I've been doing a little bit of homework, so you can test me on that. But as Peter said, I'm a founder of Diverse, which is an initiative that I started back in March 2020. So during the first lockdown, to help underrepresented young people into the world of work. At that time, there were lots of sort of reports and predictions around how the virus would impact the job market for young people. We already have a problem with youth unemployment, and the virus was only sort of predicted to add to that. And Black heritage candidates are the demographic that are most at risk of long-term unemployment. And whenever there's these large sort of societal economic shocks, it's going to be the underrepresented sort of individuals who are going to be most affected by that sort of outcome. And so what we do is focus on boosting their employability, helping them develop skills before connecting to employers that we feel are really focused and committed on diversity and inclusion. So we run online events similar to this one, I guess, every month, where we bring on employers or expert speakers to help with a full range of different things to help that audience get hired. And then we have a job board where we advertise roles with companies like BT, Capital One, Warner Media, Unidays, and ultimately help candidates get those roles. And so our network is over 3,000 now, students and recent graduates. mostly Black heritage, and a big chunk of them are also from low-income backgrounds as well. So that's, as Peter said, diversity means a whole host of different things. We really focus on sort of ethnic diversity and the sort of socioeconomic factors as well. So happy to discuss how to better attract and support diverse talent, particularly Gen Z, particularly the sort of early career sort of foundational level, into industries and organizations that maybe have historically struggled with that. So I'll pass it over to Alice next, I guess, because she's next to me on the panel.
I'm just going to jump in briefly. This is a very international audience we've got today, and MedComms is a very global business. Can I just clarify, if I'm understanding correctly, Toby, you're a UK, or your focus is the UK community?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all of our, the vast majority of our members are based in the UK, yes, looking for roles in the UK. We do oftentimes have, international students and that sort of thing, but predominantly based in the UK. To be honest, I imagine a lot of the trends that we're going to talk about here are going to be relevant for other geographies, and I think the solutions will be as well, to be honest. But yeah.
Absolutely. It's just nice to have that bit of context. Okay, so I'm going to just ask the members of the panel from MedComms to introduce themselves. We're going to start with, I'm going to go in alphabetical order, to be honest. So Andrew, you're first on. Is that okay? Just who you are, what the organisation is you represent, and we'll paint the picture of the 4 different organisations there that way.
Sure, thank you, and thanks for that, Toby. It'd be interesting to hear more over the course of the next 30-40 minutes. So I'm Andrew Davidson. I am responsible for all of the talent attraction, HR, learning and development, and also Allegro and other graduate programs that we have in Inizio Medical. So Inizio Medical is formed from Ashfield MedComms, Nucleus Health, and also Apothecom, as well as Medistrava and Medavogue, which is a coming together of those brands. We, as medical, focus predominantly on medical communications. So our 2,100 employees are typically medical writers and such like. But of course, we do have a very wide range of jobs, which in data, creative services, and increasingly, as I say, in data science as well. So lots of different sort of ways into our business, although predominantly medical communications that we specialize in. So we just launched our brand last month, and it would not, in a few weeks' time, possibly, had this call be happening, and I can talk more about it later. We are hiring a global DEI lead, and I'll cover that a bit more, Peter, but it's so important to us that we felt that's the right thing to do. So we're very close on that. And anyway, I will now pass on to whoever next to introduce themselves.
Again, I'm just going to interrupt. Sorry. I'd just like to get, for the people who don't understand MedComms, we're looking at this new, just a little bit, just the context. Inizio, let's just emphasize, is now, what are you talking about? 3,000 people. I mean, it's a big coming together of several big agency groups. You're now very big. So have I got the right number, sort of 3,000-ish?
2,100. I'd like to be.
Sorry.
I'd like to be 3,100 if I could be, but it's 2,100 plus. Global, so US, APAC, UK, Europe, and increasingly South Africa as well, and always open to other parts around the world. So something that's very important to us. So yes, very much a global company as well.
Okay, so I got the number wrong, but it's still basically, you're the biggest, basically medical communications type group, having brought those organisations together. Okay, Pete, you're next in my little alphabetical order. So if you introduce yourself, similarly talking about BioScript.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Peter Griffiths. I'm HR Talent Acquisition, and I also lead D&I at BioScript Group. BioScript Group is currently about 230, 240 people across 5 different business units. So we're BioScript, MedComms, Regulatory, Fortis, Valid Insight, and Meridian Health. In terms of my role in D&I, I lead the work stream that we've had for about a year now, and we're really going at trying to attract more people into BioScript, but the wider MedComms community as well, as BioScript starts to grow across the world as well. So predominantly we've been UK and European based, but we're now starting to branch out further afield, places like South Africa and the US.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Kirsty, you're next on my little list of alphabetization.
Thanks, Peter. My name is Kirsty Okyne. I'm agency lead for Cogent, which is one of the 11 AMICULUM agencies. AMICULUM, tell you a little bit about it. We're an independent healthcare communications and consulting business. We have about just over 350 of us across 9 countries. And obviously I've got a personal interest in this discussion, really passionate about what we can do to improve diversity, and great being on a panel with people from other agencies. Obviously I've got slightly different perspective, but I think it's something that we need to address together. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic, thanks Kirsty. So Alice, your turn.
Hi, so I'm Alice Roache and I'm Director for Talent Acquisition at IPG Health. One of the core areas I oversee in my role from a talent acquisition point of view is IPG Health's medical communications. And people may have seen, but they may not. So we've had a really exciting period of evolution here at IPG Health. So I'm going to just try very briefly to give a picture of who we are now, because there has been some change there. So people may know McCann Health Medical Communications, and they may also know FCB Health, but we've come together as IPG Health Medical Communications, bringing together all the Medcoms agencies within those brands. So we're now 8 amazing agencies: CMC Connect, CMC Affinity, Cordex, Complete Health Vision, Complete Regulatory, Pro Health, Trio, and Area 23 on Hudson. So we're now 800 people globally, mainly operating in the UK and the US. I won't go into detail on all of our services, but we're mainly working in med affairs, promotional, medical education, publications, and regulatory writing. And it's fabulous to be on the panel today and to join in this really important discussion. So thank you, Peter, for bringing us together for this conversation today. Happy to go into detail as we go through the conversation about some of the programs that we're working on. We've got quite a number of really proactive initiatives when it comes to DE&I across the whole group. So happy to talk a little bit about the things that we're trying to do, and also to learn from the wonderful panel that you've brought together as well. So thank you so much.
Excellent, thanks guys. So first, the context is there. We've got 4 very good agencies, quite different agencies, and you know, and you're all saying the similar sort of thing which we would get from lots of other people as well in MedComms. You know, we're interested in supporting our staff better and attracting a more diverse workforce. The simple fact is that MedComms is booming, and that you're all recruiting like crazy. So it's not that there's sources of jobs out there, but we need to be sure that we're going out and attracting a more diverse type of candidate. So that's very simply the scenario. Tobi, I'm going to put back to you and ask you to take the lead a little bit. What do you see from where you sit with maybe some of the other businesses you're working with, and how what do you see as the challenges really for your sort of community in terms of simply finding out about something like MedComms in the first place?
Yeah, no, I'll kick things off by, I guess, talking about the challenges. But I think first of all, from I guess your perspective in the audience and everyone on the panel, I think the first thing to sort of mention is that I've now spoken to a few of you. I've spoken to Pete, to Kirsty, and Hayley as well, and everyone. So to hear a little bit more about your industry and some of the challenges. And I think the first thing to mention is that similarly to other industries where there is a lack of diversity, in organizations where there is lack of diversity, the first thing is to recognize that this isn't an easy thing. So I think a lot of employers are very scared to say the wrong thing. They feel it's an uncomfortable topic. They're not that diverse, so they feel very uncomfortable putting anything out there. But I think, to be honest, don't be too hard on yourself, first of all. And I think the intent really matters. So whatever you do, I think as long as you have a really good intent around addressing this problem, then you'll do really well. So I think that's the first thing to sort of say, because oftentimes, I'll hear you say, we're not very diverse, so therefore we don't want to say anything about diversity. But your intent really matters, and you're all here today to try and address this issue, which I think is really important. In terms of challenges, so as I said at the beginning, we really focus on underrepresented candidates from ethnicity and socioeconomic background here in the UK, and also at a junior level as well. So getting early career hires, which I think is a really good area for employers to focus on, because you can kind of quickly increase your pipeline and your pipeline diversity. In terms of challenges of that sort of demographic, I'll put them into sort of 3 buckets. And the first one is really around insights and knowledge and sort of the access to the information. So if we take a step back, the sort of typical profile is, someone is perhaps the first in the family to go to university in the UK, or they may be the first in the family to try to be to get a job in media or tech or health or science, whatever the case may be. So they don't necessarily have a ton of insights into the different career paths that are available to them within those sectors, what the different job roles mean, what you'll be doing on a day-to-day basis. They don't necessarily have someone who has connections in that industry who can perhaps, refer them for job opportunities, or, simply introduce them to people to learn more. And so they don't tend to have a really extensive network within the sectors that they're trying to get into. And they don't typically tend to be networking as well. So that problem is sort of continuing. And that problem is really multiplied, I think, in MedComms, because it's not a sector, I don't think, that is hugely well known about anyway. And it is also, as I found over the weekend, quite difficult to really understand when you're looking at it with fresh eyes. So those are some of the key challenges, and it's really important to talk about these first because they link directly into the solutions. And then the problem we see with a lot of other employers actually is Black and underrepresented candidates at university tend to be a bit less likely to do internships and placements, meaning when they do graduate, oftentimes they might have the less experience versus a white candidate. And that's partly why there's that discrepancy with the employability rate. And then the last one is confidence. So we talk to this audience every day. We have a community so that we can do that, which is really useful for us. And time again, they'll reference a lack of confidence. And so that might be, the jobs they're going through are very, very competitive, and obviously getting a lot of rejections in the job market, and that kind of leads to a lack of confidence. And at the same time, they might be trying to get into an industry that they don't perceive to be that diverse. They don't see anyone who looks like them or is from a similar background, and that sort of adds to that lack of confidence as well. So those are the key challenges that the candidates are facing. And just on the confidence piece as well, it's very common, we hear from employers, to have higher dropout rates throughout the application process for underrepresented candidates. And when I say dropout rates, I mean them taking themselves out of the application process as opposed to being rejected. And we ask the candidates about that, and they tend to say it's because they've been faced with a lot of rejections in the past, or they found the application process quite difficult. They then sort of think, oh, I'm not sure I can get past the next stage. So to sort of save myself from that, I'm just going to take myself out of the process, which is unfortunate and something that we definitely need to address. And then I think from the employer's perspective, so from talking to some of you on the panel and probably in the audience as well, I think first of all, there's a little bit of unknown around the data with regards to diversity at university across the life sciences degrees. Unfortunately, a lot of the data is sort of grouped together, life sciences, biology, but also sports science. And so there's huge discrepancies in diversity there. So that could be a challenge. And then I think the second one, which I alluded to at the beginning, is a real understanding. So, it's hard enough to get underrepresented candidates to apply to your roles and understand your roles. But if they're not aware of you, your industry, or what the job role means, those challenges are multiplied from there. So happy to dive into the solutions, but before I do, feel free to sort of send it around the panel if anyone got any thoughts or anything to add, or any challenges that you might have seen with regards to your diversity in your applicant pool. Is it the attraction? Is it throughout the process, or what are you seeing on your side?
Tobi, I think just be interested in a perspective on this. So we see it for Inizio Medical as it's a high science. Typically, most of our jobs are quite high science. So we've almost got to track back to the the source of the talent pool, which probably is pre-university, right? We've got our Allegro program and our Nucleus Academy program, which is pretty much, you know, hothousing graduates to come into the science-based roles. We've also got, I think, people who are in our industry very altruistic, very egalitarian. So we know that we can probably do a lot of outreach to school age where they're making choices about science as a subject or a degree. Yes, we've got other jobs which are non-science, so you know there's obviously lots we can do there. But I just wonder what your thoughts are on that, because for us, a big win for us is to go right back to that sort of school career choice situation. People we know would love to be involved in that, and I think some of our focus is going to be on that, getting into schools where people are choosing those careers. So would be fascinated by your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really addressing the problem with a long-term perspective, which I think is really, really important. You're absolutely right. I mean, we do have some data on the sciences of university, and you know, there's definitely a challenge there with regards to diversity. So you're absolutely right. There's a limit there, and I think the best thing that you could kind of do is really team up and work together. So I think a lot of times employers will really go at it alone, and to some extent, some of you are maybe competing for talent, but you know, you'd be better off sort of going together as a group out to schools and at the grassroots level to encourage more people just to want to work in science and choose science at university. That's certainly the long-term view. But yeah, and then we've got, I guess, the more sort of practical next steps as well in terms of the short term. But yeah, it's really good that you're thinking long term, actually. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it does kind of mirror what we experienced too, which is probably no surprise to anybody. And for us, equally, that at that early grassroots stage, we do need to have some sort of intervention. And for us, that's making solid partnerships where we can. So we've been working with an organisation called The Pledge, which is more at that kind of school and college. Andrew, you probably have heard of The Pledge already, but they're a really fabulous organisation that have kind of supported those earlier career conversations. And really, you know, just to go back to your initial insights, Toby, those are all the reasons that we kind of formalized our early careers program and established Fuel, which is our entry-level program. And what we probably used to do too much of is just waiting for the talent pool to come to us rather than trying to get out there and address where we look. And I think, you know, we can wait for the data to be totally perfect and to base, and you know, a lot of people in MedComms are scientists, so we like nice clean data, but you know, it's not always possible. And if we let that hold us back in action, then that can be hugely problematic. So what we've tried to do is really reevaluate the academic institutions that we partner with. It's not perfect, it's not an exact science, but try to balance, you know, classic Russell Group, highly academic institutions with institutions that, you know, might offer increased diversity of all kinds. So it is that balance, and it is kind of not waiting for that perfection for us that has worked so far, and it's taken us on that journey. We're not all the way there, but we're definitely further along than we were previously. So, you know, it's just what we're doing right now.
I think in BioScript, we've taken a similar kind of bit of action. So we've reached out to the non-typical universities that we would source candidates from. So we've worked with MMU recently. We've worked with Kiel, those universities that might house more diversity. And what we found is they're really, really open to these kind of dynamics and these kind of collaborative working. And we did a day recently with MMU where students had no idea what MedComms was. And these were life science students. These were students, you know, in second year, third year, even masters in life sciences. No idea that MedComms even existed as a potential. Oh, some of them did, but maybe 2 or 3 out of a group of 20 may have even had an idea that MedComms was an option. So I think, you know, that to me is a big gap that, you know, we could look to fill.
To echo that, we're doing some similar work as Alice and Peter. I was really interested, Toby, in your first thought about the insights. And we, you know, it's sort of a great challenge to have because we work in communications, and what we talk about day in, day out is about meeting audiences where they are, reaching them through storytelling, explaining things in a way that they would understand, in a context that they would understand. So for us, it should be like really low-hanging fruit as a challenge that we can address the community. But I was really interested to understand for you, when you were looking into what MedComms is, what were the things that were sort of hard to get your head around, hard to understand? Where are we failing when we're describing MedComms? Because we've come a long way from when I started. There was nothing, and thank goodness for NetworkPharma, at least there's something. But yeah, really interested to know what we can do in terms of making sure it's more accessible so people know about our great industry.
Yeah, no, brilliant question, and it's a good one because I've just gone down this rabbit hole, so I'll touch on this, and then I'll sort of allude to sort of some of the things that have worked well with other employers. But I do want to give a shout out. I believe her name is Vicky. She's did a really good video. I think she's called Biomed Badass, I want to say, on YouTube. Yeah, she did a brilliant video, which is kind of typical of what you'd want to do, in which, you know, she took it down to the very, very basics of, you know, what the heck is MedComms, you know, and that sort of makes you feel instantly that, you know what, it's actually okay that you don't know what MedComms is. Not everyone does. It's quite, you know, complicated, and it's a bit of a kind of like an in-between, I guess, sector, you know, it's just everyone seems to know pharmaceuticals, but, you know, not necessarily MedComms as well. So I think the things that she did well, and what I would want to see, is sort of really clear, simple language. And I think this is so important for Gen Z as well. But, you know, you can't really use, you know, acronyms or, you know, super scientific language when you don't need to. Just make it really simple, really easy to understand, because, you know, especially for young candidates, if you don't do that, you're going to lose their attention very, very quickly. So I think it's literally stripping it back to the very, very basics, and then as much as possible giving examples. So I think we work with the Sanger Institute, who are a genome research organization. They're the scientific company that we work with. And one thing and their industry is incredibly complex. So one of the things they're working on is, okay, how do we use clear examples to show what we actually do and why it's important? So, you know, you guys are all in the health space. It's, you know, arguably the most important, you know, industry you could possibly be in. But what people need is stories. So, for example, Sanger helped contribute to the research that goes into making vaccines, you know. And so what you want to do is a very simple, you know, we do this so that you and the world can get this. And that might be in an animation or a video or a very simple sort of storyboard, but it's bringing things to life with examples that people already know about us, again, especially talking to young candidates. But I'm going to dive into a few tactics, and then I'd love to just hear everyone chime in and see what they think. And I guess half of what we're talking about now is the internal initiatives. So we're not going to, well, I'm not necessarily going to talk too much about, you know, internal sort of D&I policies. I'm really sort of just going to focus on the attraction phase, but feel free to touch on what you like. But I think the one thing I would say with the sort of internal policies is you do need to start there. So you do need to have, you know, your diversity and inclusion initiatives in place internally. You do need to have, you know, policies to address racism and similar problems. Otherwise, when you do attract the diverse talent, they're going to want to leave, and, you know, you're going to create sort of a negative reputation, which definitely you want to avoid. So the first stage, really, which Alice alluded to, is finding the communities. So obviously we have one as ourselves, but, you know, communities like ours where they already are building a relationship, you know, every day with hundreds of or thousands of, you know, candidates who could be relevant for your roles. You should definitely go and build those communities yourself if you have the resources, but, you know, an easier fix is to obviously find them where they are already. And so, you know, there's independent organizations like ours, or there are obviously universities as well. And, you know, as Alice mentioned, you want to focus on the universities that are particularly diverse. You can go to the HESA website to see diversity statistics by university, and also great if you can focus on Russell Group, non-Russell Group universities as well, so that you're hitting more of those lower income background candidates also. But fundamentally, what we do, our philosophy, is a very, very simple one. It's not rocket science at all. And this is something we see across sectors work really well. And it's as simple as giving back in order to attract. And so the general philosophy is, you know, share your advice, share your insights, share those with the right community that you'd like to attract, and in turn they're much more likely to want to apply to your roles. So share insights and share tips, and not only will that boost your sort of affinity, your brand affinity amongst this demographic, it's also going to make them more competitive in actually applying to your roles as well. So I'm going to give some examples of that. One of the best things that we do, one of the things we see work the best, is online events. So, you know, webinars where we bring on employers and they can talk about their organizations and their opportunities. For example, we could do an event that's all about a career in science, and that would be, you know, sort of quite broad in order to attract candidates who are maybe generally interested in career science, but don't really know about MedComms. And then from there, we might have a combination of guests. So we might have a more senior leader who can talk about the industry at a higher level and talk very specifically about what you look for in terms of hiring. And then a more junior member of staff to talk about what they do on a day-to-day basis. And so if we start with the first one, the first aspect there is, you know, a real how-to, actionable steps in terms of how you can get a job at our organization. Things like, you know, this is what we look for, this is what you can do in the interview process to stand out well. You know, this is what I typically would recommend you do in terms of research to apply to opportunities. And then the junior member staff can also talk about, you know, here's actually how I did well in the application process. This is what I did at the application stage. This is how I networked. This is what I wish I knew before I started. And that tends to be the most effective because you can really, you know, resonate with someone who is perhaps of a similar age or has just gone down the route that you're hoping to go down. And the other piece there is really inspiring them. So as we mentioned, confidence is a big problem. So what we try and do is bring on employees who perhaps represent the demographic that we're trying to hire, and they can sort of speak to their story, and someone can see, oh, there is someone that looks just like me at Warner Brothers or Google or wherever. And just by coming to speak to an underrepresented audience, you are really showing them that you care about them and you want to hire more of them. And I think just by doing that, that goes a real long way. So those online events are really important, as I said, to share information about how to do well, share insights as well about you, your organization, you know, what career paths are available. You know, Gen Z especially, they love knowing what is it like on a day-to-day basis. So if you want to do an event, I'd really focus on, you know, a day in the life of, you know, a medical writer or a software developer or whatever within science, and then literally talk about what you want to do, what you actually, you know, get up to, what tools you use. You know, that is going to help give them context to understand, you know, the industry and your organization as a whole. And then from there, once you've sort of given back, you really earn the right to present opportunities to them. So now that you've spent, you know, 40 minutes, whatever, of giving value, you're in a much better position to then advertise your opportunity to an engaged audience that's now interested in what you do, hopefully. And that's like a great way to obviously attract your talent from there. The second piece is really around the network. So one thing we saw well with Warner Brothers is they allowed us to, any candidates who applied to their graduate scheme from our organization were able to sort of have a bit of a networking call with someone in the talent team or someone in the team that they were hoping to get hired with. And that really helps sort of boost your confidence because you can sort of have a chat with a human at Warner Brothers and sort of, feel, I think, much more confident about getting that role and understand that it's just a human on the other side of the table to you. But also it gives them someone to actually help them build their network from there. And then similarly with Unidays, we've set up a mentorship program as well. So across Unidays, they've got 45 mentors who are mentoring 45 individuals from underrepresented or low-income backgrounds from our network. And again, you can see the same philosophy here of, you know, giving back, you know, a couple of hours a month, helping to answer questions for the mentee. And then that's also acting as a pipeline into Unidays, because inevitably, you know, when you're speaking to your mentor at that organization, you know, every you know, a couple of weeks for a few months, you're going to think more about uni days as a career destination. So that's worked really, really well. And then after doing those kind of things, you want to continue the engagement. So it's really important to continually send information to candidates. So we do that using our newsletter. So 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, usually we're sending, you know, further events, further tips, further opportunities to kind of maintain that engagement. So that's something I'd recommend employers do themselves or with, again, with a similar organization, just so you're maintaining that connection so you can continually advertise job opportunities. And then I'll just touch on the last few things, and then I'll shut up for a little bit and hand it back to the panel. But the other piece that we see makes a difference as well is around letting candidates into your organization. So by that, I mean creating content. So filming, you know, your offices, or, you know, filming socials or team events, or even just short interviews with staff members. And this is important because of the challenges we've got around diversity, and candidates could potentially be put off by applying to your organization or your industry. And part of the problem is because they don't really know much about what it's like at your organization. And I think particularly with early career candidates, they're looking to see, you know, visual content that kind of reflects your culture, what it's like working there, and then they're much likely to be able to see themselves in that position. So what I would do is literally just grab an iPhone and, you know, do sort of TikTok style videos, short videos showing your office or your workplaces, doing short interviews with staff members. And what we've done is embed those kind of short clips into our job descriptions. So before candidates apply, they can kind of have a little watch of your, you know, your campus or your team or your events or whatever, and then see, oh, this looks exciting. This looks like a great place to work. I think I might apply. So, and then of course, if you're building out, you know, your social media, you can share that on LinkedIn or TikTok or Instagram, if that's something that you're on the money with. And then lastly, the last sort of piece of the puzzle really is the job descriptions. So of course, you need to ensure that your job descriptions are inclusive and aren't putting people off at that stage. And I think one of the easiest things to do is to think about the requirements. So underrepresented candidates are far less likely to apply if they feel that they don't match the requirements in the job description. So there are some stats out there about, you know, underrepresented candidates are only applying if they meet, you know, 60% or 50% of the, you know, the job description, the job requirements. And so one of the real easy quick wins is to not include any requirements that aren't, you know, the nice to haves essentially. So removing anything that isn't, you know, absolutely necessary to have for that job role, because when they see those nice to haves, they view them as hard requirements essentially. So yeah, that's what I would say on job descriptions. And then very lastly, I suppose, is as well is giving sort of early access or exclusivity to the organizations that you're trying to attract people from. So, you know, you might give early bird access for a couple of weeks just to send those opportunities to a particular demographic, for example, before opening it up. But yeah, those are the things we've seen work well, and I'll hand it over to whoever wants to steal the mic from me for a little bit.
Thanks, Toby. I've written down several things as you were talking there that I think we can certainly learn from at IPG Health MedComms. So thanks for your insights.
Just to state an obvious point, listening to that, I mean, a lot of what you were talking about just made lots of sense, but it would apply to any recruitment process. I mean, you know, so you know, one of the things these guys can tell me better than I can, but you know, if you advertise for a new medical writer or something, you know, you're not short of applicants, are you? Let's face it. So again, it's just one of the challenges in here is reaching the different sorts of groups that, for whatever reason, are that little bit more difficult to reach, sort of thing. You know, a lot of what you just said there would apply to everything, but you still need to go the extra step and proactively reach out to a slightly different audience. Would you all agree with what I'm saying there? You're not short of, one of the problems you've got is you're inundated with people wanting to be a medical writer. So to some extent, presumably, that's that little bit more difficult to then go, and now I've got to go out and reach a different group of audience because I could just sit here and it's all coming to me, sort of thing. Does that make sense? So are you reaching out? How do you reach out to different sort of groups than you're already getting this barrage of applicants from anyway? Go on, Alice.
Well, there are a lot of applicants, but I'm sure, I know Andrew's team runs a couple of really fabulous, successful early careers programs, and I know there's similar programs at BioScript and the AMICULUM agencies as well. So we also have a lot of competition. So there might be a lot of candidates, but we are all fishing in the same pool. So I don't think we can sit on our hands. I think we have to think more broadly about the candidate pool. And sometimes that's about having conversations that aren't always that comfortable. Historically as a writer, we've always wanted people who've got PhDs and, ideally postdoc experience. But again, we've had to really reimagine that when we've put a diversity lens on our recruitment process, because the candidate pool looks very different at BSc and MSc and then PhD level again. So, I think there might be a lot of candidates at certain levels, but there's a lot of jobs, and I think we have to be proactive in our and intentional in our actions when it comes to recruitment processes. So we've tried to be much more open-minded about application, academic backgrounds, and then put people through a really rigorous interview process with some really clear kind of assessments that's assessing candidates against a criteria, not just against one another, so against a clear criteria. But I do think there is more that we can do. I don't know if other people feel like they're inundated with candidates. I think that we still have to be pretty proactive. Only Peter.
Yeah. I would agree. We're all looking in the same talent pool, and I guess even at that entry level, we do have a lot of candidates coming in, more so than at other levels. But I guess the thing that we have to challenge with ourselves with is how those CVs are coming to us in the first place. And it used to be, back in my day, you'd probably just fall into MedComms, started working, and then found out what it was. Then there was the group of people that found out because their brothers, sisters, dog walkers, best friend works in MedComms and it sounds really cool. And then we're in this age of people hearing about it via Peter and NetworkPharma and careers events. But those I'm sure if we did a sample of the people that came in, they came in through the same paths, which was finding out from LinkedIn, NetworkPharma, or certain universities. So actually, where we're dragging people in from is actually relatively small compared to the number of people that do life sciences or related degrees in the whole of the UK. And I think that's where we need to challenge ourselves. And it's important for it not to seem or ever give the message that it's somehow some type of second tier, or we were looking at one tier and now we're going to dip down into another tier, because it's not that. That diversity of thought is important in MedComms, and you don't need to be, as we know, from those Russell groups. So I think we need to sort of challenge our minds, and I count myself in this as well. Like, we've got this history in MedComms of how we all got here, and you're absolutely right, we have to challenge, as you were saying, Alice, challenge ourselves and thinking completely differently. But I think the pool, actually, if we really think about it, where we're getting these CVs from at entry level actually is quite narrow. And I think that's the number one challenge in my mind, and something our careers team are looking at in detail.
No,
I'm not sure if, sorry,
go on.
Go. I was just going to say, I'm not sure if COVID may have altered the hiring sort of processes for you guys, but for us, it's 1 minute we're all in the office. We think at entry level, people have got to be office based, and therefore they've got to be based in a commutable distance from our offices. But one of the things that's almost been one of the few gifts from COVID is it forced us to open our mind geographically to, different areas, remote based candidates. And that for us has really helped us from an inclusivity point of view. And I'm sure that's probably fairly similar for the rest of us. We intend for people to stay working remotely where that works for them, and to do our recruitment processes remotely where we can, and just bring people together where they want to be in the office or where there's a need to be. So that's one thing that has definitely helped us. a small gift, COVID gift.
Because there has
really
historically
important.
been a sort of focus on certain parts of the country, like Oxford, for instance, yeah, and we're drawing people out of Oxford University. It's never been quite as extreme as it seemed to be at one stage, but I don't think it was really. But there's been an element of that. So the changing in working practices, the remote work and everything else. I mean, it has to open up the pool. By night follows day sort of thing, you know, but it still needs pushing and it still needs active chasing sort of thing. Sorry, Tobi,
we recruit people, you know, in life, in, you know, their career cycle, who come from these universities that we don't potentially look at entry level. And there's a certain irony to that. You know, we'd happily take somebody from Kiel, yet somebody from Kiel applies, and we kind of have historically potentially in this industry turned our nose up at it, but they've obviously come into the business and are now a place where we would happily consider them. So why are they not good enough at entry level? And that's the kind of what we're trying to battle, I suppose, across the board. Is it shouldn't really matter. You know, while it's easy to say at entry level, yes, we do get hundreds of applications, but you know, the best applicants may not have actually applied because we didn't go out and find them. The 100 applicants may not be the best 100 applications, and that's the difference that we need to make. We need to find the best people, regardless of what their background may be. And I'm glad somebody brought up PhDs, because that kind of in itself is somewhat non-inclusive. You know, if we expect all our writers to have PhDs, and not all our writers do in BioScript, and I know it's a bit of a badge of honor for some agencies to have a high percentage of PhD writers, but the issue is we remove diversity every qualification that we ask for, as Tobi mentioned, not just by job criteria, but by what we require of them from their you know, their study. So, you know, BSc, some of our best writers in BioScript have come in with BScs, and we need to nurture that talent and give them a fair crack of the whip, so to speak. And that's what we're aiming to do at BioScript with our Pioneer program, is to, you know, give everybody a level playing field when they apply, and the best people will shine through. And they may be BSc, they may be MSc, or they may be PhD. That shouldn't be the default decision based on their qualification.
I would agree.
Absolutely.
And sorry, I was just going to say that I think it helps that the world of medcoms is changing, and being a medical writer of 10 or 20 years ago is different to now, when, you know, I don't love the term medical writer because you're writing scripts and doing animations and doing things that require creativity. And of course you need that high science background, but it also now requires a lot of other skills that we weren't necessarily looking for in such numbers 10, 20 years ago. So hopefully just the fact that the work we're doing is changing will change the types of people that we're looking for. I completely agree with you, Peter, on that level.
We need to be a bit careful, we're going to run out of time. I did want to make one point that came up a couple of times in the chat, that people are asking about when they're applying for jobs, they need experience. And I just think it's important within the conversation like this to make a very clear point, which I think a lot of people do miss, which is that medcoms are specifically going out and looking for entry-level people. There are lots of jobs at entry level which do not require experience. That's sort of the whole point. And it's a very, I mean, I don't know the details, but you know, it's a slightly glib thing to say, but if you're applying for jobs that need experience and you haven't got the experience, there's an argument to say why not, but there's also an argument to say, well, you know, don't do that. You know, this is not a business that is short now of people, and they're well represented here, but lots of others as well who are running programs for people without experience. And by definition, they are looking for people with aptitude and ability and so on, who you can turn into a medcom specialist, a medical writer, or whatever. And I just think that's a really important message to get out, because there's a bit of a myth that if we haven't got the experience, we can't get the job. How do we get the experience? No, you go for, you know, there are lots and lots of entry-level jobs. I just think that's an important point to point out, if you don't mind me saying so. Well, there are some interesting points in there. I mean, we can't get away from the fact that the sort of business is the business. So, you know, you touched on quite a lot how we go back to the early years, you know, and changing, you know, I still have a bit of a problem whether I go into my kids' school and talk about medcoms as a profession, and I still have some difficulty believing they'd really take much notice. But in terms of science communication and pharmaceutical and such like, I think there's a really important job to be done there, and we can be part of that. And then as you go up through the universities or whatever, you know, then there's a point in there where it becomes more important to go, and our specialism is this or the other sort of thing. But again, you know, there's a wider question here. The pharma industry should be more actively going into schools, into universities and so on. MedComms is, at the end of the day, quite a small specialist area, which is one of the reasons why nobody's heard of us. And that doesn't matter whether you're from a disadvantaged background or from an advantaged background. Several people have made comments in it. I never knew anything about MedComms anyway. I'd like to think after 10 years of banging a drum very loudly that I've at least got some message out there, but there's a long way to go, whatever your background, sort of thing. But you know, we should be, we can't do it all on our own. We have to be part of a wider discussion. And I have in the past put out a call to pharma industry to do more, just to talk about the sorts of range of opportunities that are here. And we should stop. But I feel I'm hoping that this sort of discussion will simply provide food for thought and you know, maybe raise more questions and answers. And I'm hoping that people watching this will contact you individually, and Tobi specifically, but all of you are very happy to hear via LinkedIn and so on. Maybe we can follow this up with other meetings and so on. But is anybody, I mean, maybe just to round off, Tobi, we do need to round off. Tobi, have you got a final sort of message beyond just come and talk to me that you can throw at us? And then I'll call a halt and we'll have a couple of minutes when we're not recording.
Yeah, no, I think just to really nail down the point, I think the sort of easy win here is to look at this and say, there's a lot of underrepresented students at university who are already interested in health and science, right? Who don't know about MedComms. You know, even that pool of candidates, if you can kind of just increase the propensity of those candidates that are successfully applying to your role in MedComms, then that would be the easiest sort of next steps. That would be the easiest win. And the way I would absolutely suggest doing that is, you know, first you've got to access that talent pool, either via universities or via the communities that they're already in. Go to them, give value by helping them understand, you know, MedComms, your opportunities, you know, what it's like at your organization, and so on and so forth, and then presenting those opportunities to them. And they'll be much more likely to be successful when you do that, versus, you know, just sort of slapping a role in front of them without the context, because I think that's when, you know, you're not going to get as many applications or as many successful applications from underrepresented candidates. So that's probably just the last point I'd want to leave it with.
Okay, I'm going to draw the line there. As much as I'd like to keep going, I'm going to draw the line there for purely practical purposes. So I'm hoping we've generated some interesting food for thought, and there'll be more conversation that comes out of this. I'll repeat the fact that I know all these guys are very happy to hear from anybody via LinkedIn. That's the easy way of doing it. I'm personally very interested to hear from anybody about what we're doing in MedComms, what I'm doing at medcomsnetworking.com, what other ways in which we can champion issues like this, if I can put it that way. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to stop the recording now. I'm going to ask the panel to give us a wave. Those of you listening to us online at the moment, don't run away. We've got a couple of minutes. But basically, thank you very much. And on that note, can I say bye-bye from everybody? Bye-bye.